A folded note slid beside my plate just as my son raised his wine glass. I unfolded it under the table. "Get up and leave now. Don't tell your son." I stared at the words, reading them again to make sure I understood correctly. I excused myself and stepped outside. 30 minutes later, everything I believed about the man I'd raised and sacrificed for lay in ruins. When the police finished questioning me, I realized that note saved me from something far worse than family drama. The person who slipped it to me? You'll never guess who had the courage to warn a father about his own son. What happened next changed everything. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and let us know in the comments where you're listening from. Mark had chosen Romano's, the upscale Italian place downtown where we'd celebrated his graduation 8 years ago. Same corner booth, same view of the fountain outside. He wore his expensive charcoal suit. His wife Rachel sat beside him in a cream silk dress. "Dad, you look great," Mark said, standing to embrace me. The hug felt genuine, warm. "How's retirement treating you?" I slid into the booth, noting how Mark's Rolex caught the candlelight. "Can't complain. Finally got the garage organized. Fixed Mrs. Peterson's fence last week." Rachel smiled warmly. "You're such a good neighbor, Andrew, always helping everyone." The waiter approached. Mark ordered a bottle of Barolo without checking the price. $250. I knew because I'd seen the wine list when we sat down. My Social Security barely covered my rent, but I said nothing. Mark was doing well. The conversation flowed easily. Mark talked about his latest clients, some tech startup that was going public. Rachel mentioned their upcoming trip to Tuscany. I shared stories about my volunteer work at the senior center, laughing as Mark teased me about becoming the neighborhood handyman. "You know, Dad," Rachel said, glancing at Mark's watch, "that's beautiful. Must have cost a fortune." Mark shrugged casually. "Investment bonus came through bigger than expected. Sometimes you have to reward yourself for good work." I noticed he didn't mention that he'd asked me for $5,000 just last month, but looking at his success, maybe that loan had been the smart move that led to this bonus. "Remember when you taught me to change a tire in this very parking lot?" Mark raised his glass. "I was 16, complaining about getting my hands dirty." I smiled, warmth spreading through my chest. "You said it was beneath you, that you'd just call 8AA. And you made me do it anyway. Said I needed to know how to take care of myself." Mark's voice carried genuine affection. "To Dad, the man who taught me everything about integrity and hard work." The wine arrived, and Mark went through the tasting ritual. Everything felt normal, comfortable. This was my successful son, my beautiful daughter-in-law, enjoying an expensive dinner together. That's when the note appeared. A woman in a server's uniform brushed past our table. Her hand moved quickly. The small piece of paper landed next to my bread plate. I glanced at it, then at Mark and Rachel, who were discussing their Italy itinerary. "Get up and leave now. Don't tell your son." I stared at the words. This had to be a mistake. A note meant for someone else. I looked around the restaurant, but the server had vanished into the kitchen. I was about to mention the note to Mark when Rachel's voice stopped me. "Andrew, you've been so generous over the years," she said, her voice taking on a different edge. "All that money you've given Mark for emergencies. You must have quite the nest egg saved up." Mark shot her a sharp look. "Rachel, we don't need to discuss Dad's finances." "Oh, I'm just curious. I mean, with your insurance policy and everything, you've planned ahead, haven't you?" My fork paused halfway to my mouth. Why would Rachel know about my insurance policy? I'd never discussed it with them. "Dad looks tired," Mark interrupted. "Maybe we should wrap this up soon. You don't want to overdo it at your age." My hands tightened on my napkin. Mark had never talked about my age like a limitation before. I folded the note carefully. "Actually, I think I will step outside for a moment, get some fresh air." "Are you feeling all right?" Rachel asked, leaning forward. "You look a little unsteady." I felt fine. Why would she say that? "Maybe you should finish your wine first," Mark suggested, sliding my glass closer. "It might help you feel better." The wine I hadn't touched yet. The wine he insisted I drink. I looked at the deep red liquid, then at my son's face. Mark's glass was full too, He'd barely touched his expensive Barolo. "I'll be right back," I said, standing. The note crinkled in my palm. "Dad, wait." Mark half rose. "You forgot your phone on the table. Take it with you, in case something happens." I glanced down at my old flip phone sitting beside my napkin. In case something happens. What did he think was going to happen to me in a restaurant parking lot? "I'm fine, Mark. Just need a minute." I grabbed the phone and slipped it into my jacket pocket. As I walked toward the exit, I heard Rachel's voice behind me. "Do you think he suspects something?" I pushed through the restaurant doors. My hands were shaking as I pulled out the note again. The parking lot stretched out before me, empty except for scattered cars under the streetlights. The November air cut through my jacket. Behind me, through the restaurant windows, I could see Mark pacing near our table while Rachel sat perfectly still, watching the door like a hawk watching prey. I thought about that last conversation with Margaret 12 years ago. She was so weak by then, her voice barely a whisper. "Promise me you'll take care of him, Andrew, but don't lose yourself doing it." I'd made that promise, kept it through everything that followed. When Mark broke down at his mother's funeral, sobbing about college being impossible without her. When his grades slipped and he needed tutors I couldn't afford. When he graduated summa cum laude and I felt every sacrifice had been worth it. When has that changed? When did his phone calls stop being, "How are you, Dad?" and start being, "I need help with something urgent"? Last month's call echoed in my memory. "Dad, I hate to ask, but I'm in a tight spot. Could you help me out? Just $5,000. I'll pay you back as soon as this commission comes through." I'd scraped together the money by skipping my blood pressure medication for 2 weeks and eating at the senior center every day. The 6th such emergency in 2 years, always with promises that never materialized. A server emerged from the kitchen entrance, moving quickly toward me across the asphalt. As she got closer, I could see her more clearly. A woman in her 40s, dark hair pulled back, uniform wrinkled from a long shift. There was something familiar about her face, but I couldn't place it. She was holding up her hand, fingers spread wide. 5 minutes. My phone buzzed. A text from Mark. "Dad, where are you? Getting worried. Please come back." Through the window, I watched him type the message, his face illuminated by the phone screen. There was nothing to worry about his expression. He looked calculating. The restaurant door opened. Rachel stepped out, her heels clicking on the asphalt as she approached. "Andrew? Mark's really worried. What's wrong?" Up close, I could see the tension in her smile, the way her eyes kept darting to my hands. "Maybe we should call it a night? Mark can get the check and we'll drive you home." Drive me home. In my own car. The car I'd driven myself tonight. Why would she assume I needed help getting home? "I'm fine, Rachel. Just need a minute." She moved closer, her perfume overwhelming in the night air. "Andrew, you know you can tell us anything, right? If you're having problems, financial or otherwise, we're family. We take care of our family." Financial problems. Why would she think I was having financial problems? I'd been careful never to show them how tight things were, unless they already knew somehow. The server appeared at my elbow. "Excuse me, sir, you left your reading glasses at the table." She pressed something into my hand. Not glasses. Another note. Rachel squinted at the woman in the dim light. "I don't think he wears reading glasses." The server kept her head turned away from Rachel. "My mistake. Must belong to someone else." I could feel the tension crackling between the two women like electricity before a storm. I unfolded the second note, my hand steadier now. "Your son plans to drug your wine tonight. Documents in his briefcase to access your life insurance and home equity. I worked for your family for 8 years. I know what kind of man you are. You deserve better. Police are already coming. Trust me. Lauren Garcia." The paper trembled in my grip. Lauren Garcia, our housekeeper when Mark was in high school and college. The woman who'd cleaned our house, cooked our meals, listened to Mark complain about homework and girls. The woman Mark had let go 3 years ago, claiming he and Rachel could handle their own housework. But Rachel had barely been around when Lauren worked for us. She was usually at work or out with friends when Lauren came to clean. They'd exchanged maybe a dozen conversations over the years. Now, 3 years later, with Lauren's hair different and wearing a server's uniform in dim lighting, Rachel couldn't place her. "Andrew, you're scaring me. What's that paper? Did someone give you something?" I looked up at Rachel and saw past the sweet smile for the first time. Her eyes were hard, predatory. She knew exactly what was in my hand. "Just someone's phone number," I lied. "Wrong person." In the distance, I could hear sirens approaching. Rachel's grip tightened on my arm. "Andrew, we really need to go back inside. Mark's going to think something's wrong." But Lauren Garcia was stepping closer, and in the restaurant's exterior lighting, I could see her face clearly for the first time in 3 years. She'd aged, stress lines around her eyes. Her server's uniform was clean but worn. I remembered her mentioning her teenage son Miguel back then, how she was working extra hours to save for his college. "Mrs. Garcia," I said quietly, "it's been a long time." Rachel's head snapped between us. "You two know each other?" "I cleaned the Lewis house for 8 years, Lauren said. "I watched Mark grow up. I loved that family like my own." The past tense hit me hard. Loved, past tense. "Andrew, we need to go inside. Now." Rachel's mask was slipping. For the first time, I saw calculation in her eyes that reminded me of Mark's expression when he talked about difficult clients. "I saw them at the bank last Tuesday," Lauren said, her voice steady despite the approaching sirens. "Your son and his wife. They were meeting with a loan officer, papers spread across the desk. I was there depositing my tips when I heard Rachel mention your life insurance policy. $500,000, she said, more than enough to cover Mark's gambling debts." My knees almost buckled. "Gambling debts? That's ridiculous," Rachel snapped. "Mark doesn't gamble. Tell her, Andrew, you know your son." But suddenly, so many things made sense. The expensive watch, the designer clothes, the frequent trips, the constant requests for money, the way he'd grown more distant over the past year, more secretive. Lauren reached into her apron and pulled out her phone. "I took pictures. At the bank, through the window. Your son owes $180,000 to some very dangerous people." She swiped through the photos, holding the screen toward me. I could see Mark's profile bent over paperwork, Rachel beside him pointing at documents. And there, clearly visible in one shot, was a life insurance form with my name at the top. "They needed you incapacitated to sign the papers," Lauren continued. "Something to make you confused, compliant. Rohypnol in your wine would have done it. Rachel had the drug in her purse. I saw her slip it into her hand when you went to the bathroom earlier." I leaned against the nearest car, struggling to stay upright. My son, my boy. He'd planned to drug me, to steal my life insurance, to leave me with nothing so he could pay off gambling debts. "You're lying," Rachel said, but her voice cracked. "This is insane. Mark would never." "Mark fired me because I caught him stealing from your medicine cabinet 3 years ago," Lauren interrupted. "Your blood pressure pills, your sleep medication. He was selling them to friends, testing what worked, what didn't. I threatened to tell you. Instead of stopping, he got rid of me." The sirens were close now. 2 police cars pulled into the restaurant parking lot, their red and blue lights painting the asphalt. "I called them 20 minutes ago," Lauren said. "When I saw the briefcase, I realized what was happening. They'll want to search Mark's car, his briefcase. They'll find the documents, the drugs, everything." Rachel's composure shattered completely. "You stupid bitch! Do you have any idea what you've done? Do you know what happens to people who cross Mark's creditors?" "Rachel." Mark's voice cut through the parking lot. He stood in the restaurant doorway. For a moment, he looked like the boy I remembered. Then he saw the police cars, saw Lauren, saw my face. His shoulders straightened, his jaw set. When he walked toward us, every step was measured. "Dad, what's going on? Why are there police cars?" But he wasn't looking at me when he asked. He was looking at Lauren. Officer Martinez approached us. "Evening, folks. We received a report of a potential drugging in progress. I'm going to need everyone to stay calm while we sort this out." "This is insane," Mark said. "My father and I were having dinner. This woman—" He gestured at Lauren. "I don't even know who she is." "Your former housekeeper," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "The one you fired 3 years ago for catching you stealing my medication. The one who couldn't stay silent anymore." Mark's face went through several micro-expressions: surprise, anger, then careful calculation. "Dad, whatever she's told you, it's not true. She's been harassing us for months, calling Rachel, showing up at my office. We were going to file a restraining order." But Lauren was already handing Officer Martinez her phone. "The photos from Tuesday, the bank meeting. You'll find the loan documents in his briefcase, the ones requiring Andrew Lewis's signature, and if you test the wine at their table, you'll find it's been contaminated." A second officer approached Mark. "Sir, I'm going to need to see some identification, and I'd like permission to search your vehicle and any bags you might have with you." "I want a lawyer." The words came out of Mark's mouth without hesitation, without even a glance in my direction. That's when I knew. My son, the boy I'd raised to be honest and honorable, was guilty of everything Lauren had accused him of. Because an innocent person doesn't ask for a lawyer when their father is standing there bleeding from betrayal. An innocent person explains. An innocent person fights for their family's trust. Rachel broke. She sprinted toward the street in her expensive heels, but only made it 20 feet before Officer Martinez tackled her to the ground. The cream silk dress tore as she hit the asphalt. From her purse, scattered by the impact, came a small vial of clear liquid and a stack of documents with my name on them. "Let's go back inside," Officer Martinez said. "We'll need statements from everyone, and I'd prefer to do this away from the crowd." A small group of restaurant patrons had gathered by the windows, their faces pressed against the glass. I caught glimpses of their expressions: shock, curiosity, phones being held up to record whatever drama was unfolding. Mark walked beside me in silence. Rachel had already been taken away in the back of a police car, her expensive dress torn, her makeup streaked with tears and mascara. The vial of Rohypnol and the forged documents scattered from her purse were now evidence bags in Officer Martinez's possession. But Mark showed no emotion about his wife's arrest. No concern, no shock, no attempt to defend her. He walked with measured steps, his expensive shoes clicking against the restaurant's marble floor. We returned to our corner booth. The wine glasses sat exactly where we'd left them, Mark's barely touched, mine still full of the Barolo that would have incapacitated me. The bottle he'd ordered so confidently now seemed ominous under the warm lighting. "I'm going to need everyone to remain seated while we process this area," Officer Martinez said. A forensics technician was already unpacking testing equipment, preparing to analyze the wine. "Mr. Lewis, I understand this is difficult, but I need you to walk me through the evening from the beginning." I started talking, my voice surprisingly steady. The dinner invitation, Mark's expensive choices, the note from Lauren. But as I spoke, I found myself watching my son's face, searching for any sign of remorse. There was nothing. Mark sat with his hands folded, his expression neutral, occasionally nodding as if he were hearing about someone else's life. "Dad," he said quietly when I finished, "I need you to listen very carefully. This woman has been stalking our family for 3 years. She's mentally unstable. She was fired for stealing, and she's never gotten over it." "Stealing what?" I asked. Mark's pause was barely perceptible. "Small things. Jewelry, cash from Rachel's purse. We were lenient because we felt sorry for her, but eventually we had no choice." Lauren sat across from us, her server's uniform looking shabby next to Mark's tailored suit, but her eyes were clear, focused. She didn't look like someone suffering from mental instability. "Show them the briefcase," she said quietly. Mark's hand moved almost imperceptibly toward the leather case beside him. "I don't have to show them anything without my lawyer present." Officer Martinez was already calling for a search warrant. "You know what I keep thinking about?" I said, surprising myself. "Your 10th birthday party, remember? Your mother was so sick from the chemo, but she insisted on making your cake from scratch, chocolate with peanut butter frosting." Mark's mask slipped for just a moment. His jaw tightened. "Dad, don't—" She could barely stand, but she spent 3 hours in that kitchen because you'd mentioned wanting a homemade cake. And when you blew out the candles, you wished for her to get better. I leaned forward, searching his face. "Do you remember what she said, right before the party?" He was staring at the table now, his hands clenched into fists. "She said, I want him to grow up to be the kind of man who takes care of people, not the kind who takes advantage of them." My voice cracked. What happened to that boy, Mark? What happened to the son who used to help me fix Mrs. Peterson's fence without being asked? Who saved his allowance for 6 months to buy his mother flowers when she was sick? People change, Dad. His voice was quiet, resigned. Life gets complicated. Life gets complicated, or you made it complicated. The forensics technician was testing the wine now, and everyone in the restaurant was watching. When did my life insurance policy become your solution? When did drugging your own father become an option? Mark looked around the restaurant, noting the other diners who were pretending not to stare, the phones being held up to record our conversation. His jaw tightened as he realized his public humiliation was being documented. But instead of backing down, something darker emerged in his expression. Dad, let me explain something to you very clearly, he said, his voice dropping to a whisper that somehow felt more menacing than shouting. You're sitting here making me out to be some kind of monster, but let's talk about reality. You're 75 years old. You live in a one-bedroom apartment. You eat dinner at the senior center because you can't afford groceries. What kind of life is that? The words hit me like physical blows. I was offering you a peaceful exit, a chance to be remembered as a good father who provided for his family. Instead, you're choosing this: public humiliation, a criminal trial where everyone will see exactly how pathetic your life has become. Officer Martinez stepped closer. Sir, I'm going to need you to calm down. But Mark ignored her, his focus entirely on me. Do you want to know the truth, Dad? I've been supporting you for years. Those loans you thought you were giving me, that was your own money I was giving back to you. Your Social Security barely covers your rent. I've been paying for your medicine, your utilities, your food. You've been living on my charity, and you never even knew it. I felt like the floor had dropped out from under me. Had I been that blind? That dependent without even knowing it? And now, Mark continued, his voice gaining strength as he saw my confusion, you're going to throw that away for what? The word of a disgruntled former employee? Some blurry photos? Rachel's hysterical accusations? Tell him about the practice runs, Mark. The voice came from across the restaurant. Rachel had been brought back in for the confrontation, flanked by 2 officers. Her makeup was smeared, her dress still torn, but her eyes were blazing with fury. Tell him about the times you tested the dosages to see how confused you could make him without triggering suspicion. Mark's face twisted with rage. Shut your mouth, Rachel. But she was beyond caring about his anger. She was a woman watching her husband throw her to the wolves, and survival instincts had kicked in. Her sweet daughter-in-law persona completely shattered, revealing someone who'd been calculating and complicit from the beginning. Tell him how you laughed when he couldn't remember conversations. Tell him how you said it was like training a dog. Rachel's voice carried years of suppressed guilt. I told myself I was helping you, Andrew, that Mark knew what was best, but he was training me too, wasn't he, Mark? Training me to see you as a burden instead of a person. The restaurant went completely silent. Even the kitchen staff had stopped their work to listen to this family destroy itself in public. Mark looked at me with something approaching pity. Dad, you're making the wrong choice. Even now, even after all this, I'm willing to take care of you. We can work something out. But if you continue down this path, if you press charges and make this public, you'll have nothing. No family, no support, no one who cares whether you live or die. It was a threat disguised as concern, an ultimatum wrapped in the language of love. Choose him or choose to die alone. But as I looked at my son's face, the calculation behind his eyes, the way he was using my fears and vulnerabilities as weapons, I realized something profound. I'd rather die alone with my dignity than live as his victim. You know what the saddest part is, Mark? I said, my voice steady for the first time all evening. I can see your mother in your face, the shape of your eyes, the way you hold your head when you're thinking, but everything else, your voice, your words, your heart, that's all stranger to me. Mark's composure finally cracked completely. His face flushed red, veins standing out on his forehead. Fine. You want to do this the hard way? Let's see how you feel when you're eating cat food and can't afford your blood pressure medication. Let's see how noble you feel when you're dying alone in that pathetic apartment. Officer Martinez stepped forward with handcuffs. "Mark Lewis, you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit fraud, attempted assault, and possession of a controlled substance with intent to use in the commission of a felony." As they read him his rights, Mark looked at the other diners, at their phones recording his breakdown, and something like embarrassment finally crossed his face. But it wasn't shameful for what he'd done. It was annoyance at being caught. "This isn't over, Dad," he said as they led him toward the door. "You think Lauren Garcia is going to take care of you? You think these strangers are going to pay your bills? You're making the biggest mistake of your life." But as I watched him being led away in handcuffs, I realized he was wrong. The biggest mistake of my life was spending 12 years enabling a sociopath. Tonight, I was finally correcting it. The boy I'd raised was gone, had been gone for years. What remained was a stranger who wore my son's face and used the values I'd tried to teach him to justify the unthinkable. For the first time in years, I felt free. 3 hours later, I sat watching my son's world collapse through a one-way mirror. Detective Sarah Williams had been methodical, laying out evidence piece by piece. Lauren's photos, the Rohypnol found in Rachel's purse, forged insurance documents, bank records showing unauthorized transfers. "We've traced $47,000 in unauthorized transfers from your father's accounts over the past 18 months, Detective Williams said, sliding documents across the metal table. "Small amounts at first, 500 here, 1,000 there. Always when your father was out of town or had mentioned feeling unwell." Mark's lawyer, Catherine Morse, leaned forward. "My client exercised legitimate financial authority granted to him by his father. There's nothing criminal about managing an elderly parent's finances." "There is when you're stealing from them," Detective Williams replied calmly. She pulled out another set of documents. "Your client convinced his father to give him power of attorney privileges last year. Told him it was just for emergencies, in case something happened to him." I leaned forward in my chair, my hands clenched. Last year, Mark had mentioned that I should consider giving him limited financial authority, just in case I ever had a medical emergency. I'd thought it was thoughtful, responsible planning. That power of attorney gave you access to transfer funds without your father's direct authorization. Very convenient for someone with mounting gambling debts. Mark's face went white when Detective Williams showed him photos of his meetings with Vincent Romano and Michael Castellano from the Torino crime family. "Your creditors, Mr. Lewis, the gentlemen who were becoming impatient about your $180,000 debt." "I want to call my lawyer," Mark said, but his voice lacked conviction. "She's sitting right here," Detective Williams said. "Unless you mean you want to call a different lawyer? One who specializes in organized crime cases?" Through the speaker, I could hear Mark's breathing becoming rapid, shallow. The confident businessman facade was crumbling, revealing someone who was genuinely terrified. But the devastating moment came when Detective Williams pulled out her phone and placed it on the table. "Rachel made some very interesting calls while she was in custody. Want to hear one?" She pressed play. Rachel's voice filled the room, shaky but clear. "Mark, they know everything. About the pills, about the insurance plan, about what you said would happen after tonight. I can't do this anymore. I can't be part of killing your father." Mark's voice responded, cold and calculating. "Rachel, listen to me very carefully. You're having a breakdown. The stress is making you delusional. When they ask you questions, you tell them you don't remember anything clearly. Can you do that?" "I remember everything, Mark. I remember you saying he was going to have an accident in his apartment. I remember you testing the pills on him to see how much would be too much. I remember—" The recording stopped. Mark was staring at the phone like it contained a venomous snake. "That call was made 2 hours ago," Detective Williams said. "While your wife was in custody, you were still claiming she was mentally unstable. Sounds pretty lucid to me." Catherine Morse was frantically taking notes, but her face had gone pale. She was realizing that her client had just been caught coaching a witness. Detective Williams pulled out a laptop and turned it toward Mark. "We also recovered some very interesting internet searches from your computer. How long does Rohypnol stay in the system? Elderly overdose symptoms. Natural causes, death investigation procedures. Life insurance payout timeline. Each search hit Mark like a physical blow. His carefully constructed defense was dissolving in real time. "And my personal favorite," Detective Williams said, clicking to another screen, "how to make pill overdose look accidental. You searched for that one 47 times over the past 3 months. Very thorough research, Mr. Lewis." The interrogation room fell silent except for Mark's labored breathing. Through the mirror, I watched my son realize that every lie he'd told was being systematically dismantled. Detective Williams stepped out briefly and returned with another detective, a tall man who introduced himself as Detective Robert Hayes from Financial Crimes. "Mr. Lewis," Detective Hayes said, "we've been investigating your employer, Henderson and Associates, for the past 6 months. Your name came up quite frequently in our inquiry." Mark's face went white. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Client fund embezzlement. Over $2 million spread across 47 different portfolios. We have digital evidence of unauthorized transfers, forged authorization documents, and false investment reports." Detective Hayes spread out bank statements across the table. "Your signature is on all of them." Mark's lawyer was frantically flipping through the documents. "This is the first we're hearing of any financial crimes investigation." "Because it's been classified until today," Detective Hayes interrupted. "But when your client's name came up in connection with the attempted murder case, we decided it was time to coordinate our investigations." Detective Williams leaned forward. "Here's the timeline as we understand it, Mark. 18 months ago, you started skimming from client accounts to cover gambling losses. Small amounts at first, but the debts kept growing. 6 months ago, you escalated to major embezzlement. But even stealing $2 million wasn't enough to cover what you owed Romano's people." She pulled out another document. "So you started planning to kill your father for the insurance money. But that still wouldn't have been enough, would it? Even with the $500,000 from his life insurance, you'd still owe the Torinos over $1 million. Mark said nothing, but his hands were shaking visibly now. "So you had a bigger plan," Detective Hayes continued. "After your father's death, you were going to disappear. New identity, new life. We found the fake passport application, the offshore bank accounts, the plane tickets to a non-extradition country. You were going to let your clients discover their stolen money after you were long gone. And here's the beautiful part," Detective Williams added. "Your wife knew about all of it. She was going to disappear with you, except she got cold feet at the last minute and decided to save herself by cooperating with us." The full scope of Mark's crimes was staggering. He wasn't just planning to kill me, he was planning to defraud dozens of families and disappear forever, leaving a trail of destruction behind him. "Vincent Romano sang like a bird the moment we mentioned your name," Detective Hayes said. "Turns out he was very interested in helping us understand exactly how you plan to pay your debts. He's facing life without parole, so cooperation looks very attractive right now." Detective Williams wasn't finished. She pulled out her phone and showed Mark a photograph. "Recognize this man?" Mark's face went gray. In the photo was a man in his 60s, wearing a business suit, lying motionless in what looked like a parking garage. "Thomas Bradley, 72 years old, client of yours at Henderson and Associates. He discovered you'd been embezzling from his retirement account and threatened to go to the police." Detective Hayes's voice was deadly serious. "He was found dead in his car last Tuesday. Heart attack, according to the initial report. But the toxicology results came back this morning. Massive overdose of cardiac medication." The room was completely silent. Mark was staring at the photograph, his face completely drained of color. "Romano told us you handled problem clients personally, said you had a talent for making things look natural." Detective Williams's voice was ice cold. "Thomas Bradley is murder one, Mark. Premeditated death penalty case." Mark's composure finally, completely shattered. He slumped forward in his chair, his face in his hands, making choking sounds that might have been sobs. "How many others?" Detective Hayes asked quietly. "How many clients figured out what you were doing? How many heart attacks and accidental overdoses are we going to find when we start looking?" Through the one-way mirror, I watched my son transform from a confident businessman into a broken, desperate man facing multiple life sentences. The boy I'd raised was not just gone. He'd become a serial killer. I felt Lauren's hand on my shoulder. She'd entered the observation room quietly, but her presence was a comfort. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I'm sorry you had to see all of this." But I wasn't sorry. I needed to see it. I needed to understand exactly who Mark had become, exactly what I'd been blind to for so many years. In the interrogation room, Mark was talking now, his voice barely audible. 3 others, including Bradley, all clients who got too curious about their account statements. Detective Williams was taking notes rapidly. "Names and locations, Mr. Lewis? We're going to need everything." As Mark began confessing to multiple murders, I realized that the stranger wearing my son's face was even more dangerous than I'd imagined. He wasn't just a man who'd tried to kill his father for money. He was a predator who'd been systematically murdering anyone who threatened his schemes. The father I'd been was finally, truly dead. The man who would have made excuses for this monster, who would have blamed himself for Mark's choices, was gone. I was free to become someone new. 6 months later, I stood in a courtroom watching my son receive his sentence. Life without parole for first-degree murder, plus additional consecutive sentences for embezzlement, racketeering, and attempted murder. The judge's words echoed in the chamber. "Mr. Lewis, your crimes represent not just a betrayal of trust, but a complete abandonment of human decency. The court finds no evidence of remorse, no possibility of rehabilitation." Mark wore an orange jumpsuit instead of his expensive suits. He'd lost weight, his face gaunt and hollow. When the bailiff led him away in handcuffs, he didn't look back at me. There was nothing left between us to acknowledge. Rachel had received 8 years for her cooperation in the investigation. Her testimony had helped convict 3 members of the Torino crime family and recovered most of the stolen client funds. Even her betrayal had been calculated, strategic. Outside the courthouse, Lauren waited by her car. She'd been promoted to restaurant manager at Romano's. Her teenage son Miguel was with her, a quiet boy with observant eyes. "How do you feel?" she asked. "Free," I said. "For the first time in years, I feel free." The month since Mark's arrest had been difficult, but liberating. I'd started volunteering with the Senior Fraud Prevention Program, sharing my story with other elderly victims. The work was painful, but purposeful. Every person I helped felt like a small redemption. I'd also started attending grief counseling, learning to mourn not just the son I'd lost, but the version of myself that had lived only through his success. The therapist, Dr. Rebecca Thompson, had helped me understand that my identity had become so wrapped up in Mark's achievements that I'd lost track of my own worth. "Your value as a person isn't determined by your children's choices," she'd told me during one session. "You raised him with love and good intentions. His decisions as an adult are his responsibility, not yours." It had taken months to believe that, but slowly I was rebuilding a life based on my own interests, my own relationships, my own definition of success. Miguel kicked at the courthouse steps, his hands shoved deep in his pockets. At 15, he was at the age where the world seemed simultaneously infinite and impossible. Lauren had mentioned he was struggling with math, that his grades were slipping. "Miguel," I said, "your mother tells me you're having trouble with algebra." He shrugged, not meeting my eyes. "It's stupid. I'm never going to use it. I used to be an engineer. Algebra was the foundation of everything I did." I paused. "Would you like some help?" No charge, no pressure. Just an old man who remembers what it's like to struggle with something that seems impossible. Lauren smiled. "Miguel's been asking about getting a tutor, but they're expensive," I finished. "I know. Been there myself." Over the following weeks, Miguel started coming to my apartment twice a week for math tutoring. What began as homework help evolved into something deeper. He'd tell me about school, about his friends, about his worries for the future. I'd share stories from my engineering days, teach him not just algebra, but problem-solving, persistence. Unlike my relationship with Mark, this mentorship had boundaries. I wasn't trying to live vicariously through Miguel's success or sacrifice my own well-being for his advancement. I was simply sharing knowledge and experience, offering guidance without expectation of return. "You're good at this," Lauren said one evening as she picked Miguel up from our session. "He actually looks forward to coming here. His grades have improved dramatically. He's a good kid, smart, curious. I just needed someone to believe in him. We stood in my apartment doorway. Lauren had risked her job, her safety, to save my life. I'd learned to trust again, to form relationships based on mutual respect rather than one-sided sacrifice. One evening, as Lauren was picking up Miguel, she lingered in my doorway. "The restaurant owner wants to expand, maybe open a second location. He's asked me to help plan it." "That's wonderful. You deserve every success." "I keep thinking about that night at Romano's," she said quietly. "How terrified I was to slip you that note. I almost didn't do it." "What changed your mind?" "I remembered something you used to say when I worked for your family. You'd tell Mark, 'Character is what you do when no one's watching, but courage is what you do when everyone is.' That night, I needed to find my courage." After she left, I realized that Lauren had given me something invaluable beyond saving my life. She'd shown me that the values I'd tried to instill in Mark hadn't been wasted. They'd taken root in someone else, someone who'd used them to make the right choice when it mattered most. Later that evening, I sat in my quiet apartment with a cup of tea, looking through the mail. A letter from my bank about my retirement account, slowly rebuilding after years of depletion. An invitation to speak at another senior center about fraud prevention. A birthday card from Mrs. Peterson, thanking me for fixing her fence again. Simple things, honest things. A life built on genuine relationships rather than obligation and manipulation. My phone rang. When I answered, a professional voice said, "Mr. Lewis, this is Dr. Susan Mitchell from the Federal Bureau of Prisons. I wanted to update you on your son's situation. He's asked if he could see you before his transfer to the maximum security facility." I considered this for a long moment. The old me, the father who'd lived only through his son's life, would have rushed to that prison. Would have hoped against hope that Mark had found genuine remorse, that some version of the boy I'd raised still existed, but I wasn't that man anymore. "Please tell Mark that I wish him no harm, but I have nothing more to say to him." "Are you sure? He says he has something important to tell you." "I'm sure. Mark made his choices. Now I'm making mine." After hanging up, I went to my desk and pulled out the journal Dr. Thompson had encouraged me to keep. In it, I wrote, "Today, I realized that love without boundaries isn't love. It's enabling. I spent 12 years trying to save my son from consequences, from struggle, from the very experiences that build character. In trying to give him everything, I taught him to value nothing. The greatest gift I can give him now is the space to face his choices without my intervention. And the greatest gift I can give myself is a life defined by my own values, my own relationships, my own definition of success." I closed the journal and looked around my small apartment. It wasn't much. A far cry from the house I'd sold to fund Mark's education, from the comfortable retirement I'd sacrificed for his dreams. But it was honest. It was mine. It was enough. Tomorrow, Miguel will come for his tutoring session. We'd work through quadratic equations and talk about his hopes for college. Lauren would pick him up and update me on her new responsibilities at the restaurant. Mrs. Peterson would probably ask me to look at her leaky faucet. Small interactions, genuine relationships, a life built on mutual respect and shared humanity rather than manipulation and exploitation. For the first time in years, I was looking forward to tomorrow. 1 year later, I sat in Dr. Thompson's office for what I knew would be our final session. Through her window, I could see the first leaves of autumn beginning to turn, a reminder that change, even difficult change, could be beautiful. "How are you feeling about our work together coming to an end?" she asked. "Ready," I said. "For the first time in years, I feel ready for whatever comes next." It had been a long journey to get here. The first few months after Mark's sentencing had been the hardest. There were nights when I'd wake up in a cold sweat, reliving that dinner at Romano's, wondering if I could have seen the signs earlier, done something different. But Dr. Thompson had helped me understand that the what-ifs were chains that would keep me prisoner to a past I couldn't change. "I've been thinking about Margaret a lot lately," I said, "about the promises I made to her when she was dying." "Tell me about those promises." "I promised her I'd take care of Mark, make sure he never struggled alone. I kept that promise too well, I think. I shielded him from every consequence, every difficulty, until he learned to expect rescue instead of learning resilience. I paused, gathering my thoughts. But there was another promise I made. I promised her I'd live a good life, that I'd find happiness even after she was gone. I forgot about that promise somewhere along the way. And now? Now I'm finally ready to keep it. After the session, I drove to Miguel's high school to pick him up for our afternoon tutoring session. It had become a routine I treasured, not because I was trying to replace Mark, but because it represented something healthy and sustainable. Miguel was doing well in his classes now, talking about college applications, excited about his future, and I was part of that without sacrificing my own well-being. "Mr. Lewis," Miguel jogged toward my car, his backpack bouncing. "Guess what? I got an A on the calculus test. Mrs. Henderson said it was one of the best scores in the class." "That's fantastic. You've worked hard for it." I never thought I'd say this, but I actually enjoy math now. It's like solving puzzles. As we drove to my apartment, Miguel chatted about his day, his friends, and his plans for the weekend. It struck me how different this relationship was from the one I'd had with Mark. There was no desperate neediness on my part, no sense that my worth was tied to his success. I was simply a mentor, offering guidance and support without expectation of anything in return. At my apartment, we worked through calculus problems for an hour. Miguel had developed confidence in his abilities, and it showed in how he approached each challenge. When Lauren came to pick him up, she found us laughing over a particularly tricky equation that Miguel had just solved. "You two look like you're having fun," she said. "Miguel's becoming quite the mathematician," I said. "I think he's ready for advanced placement next year." "Really?" Miguel's eyes lit up. "You think I'm ready for AP Calculus?" "I think you're ready for whatever you set your mind to." After they left, I made dinner and settled in with a book. It was a quiet evening, the kind I'd once dreaded but now appreciated. My phone rang. It was my brother Jim calling from Seattle. "Hey Andrew, how are you holding up?" "I'm doing well, actually. Really well." "I saw the news story about that fraud prevention program you're involved with. Sounds like important work." "It is. I spoke at a senior center in Tacoma last week. If you know any elderly folks who might benefit from learning about the warning signs, let me know." We talked for another 20 minutes, catching up on family news, making plans for Jim to visit at Christmas. It felt good to have that connection, to be part of a larger family network again. Later that evening, I sat at my desk to write in my journal. It had become a nightly ritual, a way to process the day and mark my progress. 1 year ago tonight, I thought my life was over. I thought I'd lost everything that mattered, my son, my purpose, my identity as a father. I was wrong. I hadn't lost those things. I'd simply been looking for them in the wrong places. Mark was never mine to save. He was his own person, responsible for his own choices. My job was to love him, guide him, and then let him go to make his own way in the world. I failed at the letting go part, and in trying to save him from consequences, I enabled him to become someone who could justify terrible things. But I've learned something important. The love I gave wasn't wasted, even if it didn't save Mark. It found its way to other people who needed it. Lauren, who had the courage to do the right thing. Miguel, who just needed someone to believe in him. The elderly victims I speak with who need to know they're not alone. Tomorrow marks the beginning of my 2nd year of this new life. I'm not the man I was a year ago, and I'm grateful for that. I'm not defined by my failures as a father or by Mark's crimes. I'm defined by what I choose to do going forward. I choose to live with purpose. I choose to form healthy relationships. I choose to honor Margaret's memory by living a good life, not just an obligated one. I closed the journal and prepared for bed. As I brushed my teeth, I caught sight of myself in the bathroom mirror. I looked older, certainly. The stress of the past year had left its marks. But there was something different in my eyes, a clarity that hadn't been there before, a sense of peace. My phone buzzed with a text message. For a moment, my heart skipped. Old habits die hard, and part of me still associated unexpected messages with Mark's emergencies. But this was from Lauren. "Miguel wanted me to thank you again for today. He's so excited about AP Calculus. You've given him confidence I never could have. Thank you for everything." I typed back, Thank you for saving my life, in more ways than one. As I lay in bed, I thought about tomorrow. I had a speaking engagement at a senior center in the morning. My story was helping other elderly people recognize and avoid financial scams. In the afternoon, I was meeting with Mrs. Peterson to look at her leaky kitchen faucet. In the evening, I was having dinner with Jim's old college friend who was visiting from Portland. Simple plans, honest relationships, a life built on mutual respect and genuine care rather than manipulation and need. For the first time in over a decade, I was looking forward to tomorrow, not because of what someone else might accomplish, but because of what I might contribute to the world. The boy I'd raised was gone, and the father I'd been with was gone too. But the man I was becoming, the man I was choosing to be, was someone I could respect. Someone Margaret would have been proud of. Someone who understood the difference between loving someone and enabling them, between supporting someone and sacrificing yourself for them. Recovery isn't about forgetting what happened or pretending it doesn't hurt. It's about building something new from the pieces that remain. It's about choosing hope over bitterness, growth over stagnation, love over fear. Please like this video if my story resonated with you, subscribe to hear more stories of resilience and recovery, and share your own experiences in the comments below. Your support means more than you know. To hear another story of family complexity and personal growth, click the link on your screen. Thank you for listening to my journey from betrayal to healing.